Well, it's not an ideal, it's a reality. Um, um, every time you go to the Eucharist, if that's not a reality where you experience, that's a bad word, where you partake of the body and blood of Christ through which you are made peace for the world, that's a reality. It's not an ideal. And then the question is how in the hell do you learn to live it out? And the answer is with a lot of help. You can never, Christianity is an extensive training in vulnerability that makes us depend upon other people. That's the reason it just scares the hell out of us. And so exactly, you're going to need a lot of friends. The most interesting, I think one of the most interesting questions about nonviolence has to do with police and how do you live in a world where the police do not have to kill in order to perform their function in terms of the police function. And that's a deep challenge for all of us to ask what kind of social order do we need to be in which Christians might possibly be called to the police function of the state in a manner that they would rather die than have to kill. Because I take it that that's part of the just war presumption. And that is a deep challenge because it's not even an articulate question for most people in the kind of social order in which we find ourselves. I mean, most Christians don't have any sense that as Christians we have a problem with war and violence because they never hear it preached. When was the last time you heard a sermon about war or violence? I mean, we know that we don't want violence perpetrated against us, but then we have to do it. I mean, you can say, I mean, where I say I represent the Tonto principle of Christian ethics. I now discover I have to explain this. The Lone Ranger was just that, one of the last Texas Rangers who was sent out to deal with a desperado band, and he was shot and left for dead, and the last Native American of a tribe found him, nursed him back to health, and they went around the West righting wrongs. The Lone Ranger always wore a silver shooter, 6-shooter, rode on a white horse, had had an eye mask so you wouldn't know who he was. Jay Silverhill's, his Native American counterpart, was always noble and so on. But finally, they found themselves surrounded by 20,000 Sioux in the Dakotas. And the Lone Ranger looked over to Tonto and said, "This looks pretty tough, Tonto. What do you think we ought to do?" And he said, "What do you mean, we, white man?" Now, Christians in America have assumed, as I was suggesting, that the Christian we and the American we are the same we. And that's part of the problem, that, and you can say that no speech act was more determinative for that, the identification of that we, than the day after September the 11th, when, for comforting the American people, the president said, "We are at war." And the Christian we identified with that we. Well, if the Christian we had had any sense, they would have said, "No, that wasn't war, that was murder." And you don't go to war against a murderer. As soon as you said we were at war, you gave bin Laden exactly what he wanted. You turned him into a warrior, not a murderer. And then you had to go out and find people to kill. Exactly part of what it means to be a Christian is to know when to call into question the public we's, and because that's a grounding of a lot of our violences, and it'll get you into a lot of trouble. The identification of the American project with, in particular, the Protestant Christian project, I think has been hopefully God is bringing to an end. I mean, think about. I'm very sympathetic with people who make that identification because it's almost inevitable, given the public education, which I prefer to call nationalistic education, that is part and parcel of this country. I mean, think about how you learn the story. Well, it started with polytheism transmuted into ethical monotheism that the Jews represented, which was then joined with the rational tradition of the Greeks, given new form through the pragmatism of Rome mixed with Christianity, that produced something called Western civilization, which had gone to hell in a handbasket through the development of the Middle Ages, which were dark, until you got the renewal of Christianity through the charismatic embodiment of Luther that discovered the dignity of the individual, thereby creating free social orders which Europe couldn't quite manage given its Catholic background, but came to fruition through the development of our Puritan forebearers in America, whose theocratic aspirations were just momentary but turned out to be thoroughly democratic. And therefore, out of this extraordinary providential account of world history, came America. Is that pretty much the story you learned? And that you're continuing to have it reinforced in various ways at Azusa Pacific. That story, of course, is a lie. And it is not the story that the church should tell about who we are. But that's the story that's so deeply ingrained in us that I know it's very hard to resist. And therefore it becomes absolutely crucial for Christians to develop an alternative historiography. Rather than teaching American church history, why don't we teach the church's story of America and do it from the point of view of Christians living in Madagascar? That would be really interesting. I noticed up here, I always say the secular finds a way to destroy your life. The way it did it for me is that Time magazine named me the best theologian in America. I'm not, as it says there, America's best theologian. I'm the best theologian in America. I just happen to live here. I'm not qualified by it. Of course, I am qualified by it. I'm thoroughly American. I'll talk about that some tonight. But exactly the to say that one isn't Christian because one doesn't support America, I would take as a great compliment. That doesn't mean we shouldn't love America. It is a people of extraordinary energy and with a geography that is wondrous. But what do you do? I mean, America is a country that has no idea of what to do with wrongs that are so wrong, there is nothing you can do to make them right. Slavery is a wrong so wrong, there is nothing you can do to make it right. Native American genocide is so wrong, there is nothing you can do to make it right. You can only be forgiven for wrongs that are so wrong, you can't make them right. And then you have to remember them truthfully. America is not ready to acknowledge wrongs that are so wrong. There's nothing you can do to make them right. What we currently confront is the failure of the success of the civil rights movement. Namely, people now think that Martin Luther King won. He has his own day. African Americans can move to the suburbs, have 2 cars, 3 TVs, and worry about Jews moving in. What was a little slavery between friends? You know, I mean, how to come to terms with that as America is, I mean, Barack Obama in some ways is a misleading example that relieves that as a problem. How to come to terms with that? Christians at least know that, I know as a layperson, every Good Friday I get to holler, crucify him, crucify him. That's a wrong so wrong, there's nothing you can do to make it right. And that's the reason why Christianity is extended training in learning to confess one's sin, which is a theological achievement. It isn't a natural condition. So if we could help this country more honestly confess our sin in a way that we might tell our history more truthfully, then I would think I would be happier being an American.